and also former General Secretary of the TS in East and Central Africa. He writes regularly for the Theosophist and other journals, and many members here may have read his articles from time to time. Brother Vora has been a guest speaker at the Theosophical Society's conventions in Tanzania, Zambia, and South Africa. He has been a regular speaker in Kenya and has also given talks in the United Kingdom as well. The Nairobi Lodge has published a book called Healing the Planet, which contains a collection of his talks and articles. Mr. Vora is a chartered accountant by profession, now retired. His lecture title this evening is The Plucking of a Flower Affects a Distant Star. I now ask him to address us.
Respected International President Radhaji, the chairman for this session, Mrs. Linda Oliveira, Brother Antonio, and my co-speaker, Manjuji. It is indeed a great pleasure and a privilege to be here at this Congress and to be able to share with you some ideas on the theme of our convention. Very many insightful presentations have been made in the last few days on the theme of the Congress, namely universal brotherhood without distinction. As we come to the end of the Congress with this final presentation, I propose to consider life in its totality. As you have been informed, the title of this talk is The Plucking of a Flower Affects a Distant Star. A great sage once made this statement about the plucking of the flower affecting a distant star. This statement, when considered superficially, might seem to be very far-fetched. How can the plucking of a flower on this planet affect a distant star? But it is true in the sense that there is innate unity of all existence, and there is interconnectedness at all levels. An infinite harmony in nature extends from the smallest forms of life or microorganisms to the greatest star systems and galaxies in the universe. This natural order ensures that each form of manifestation of life has its appropriate place and role in the evolution of life to its fullness. In a similar vein to what the great sage said, the early 20th century Viennese biologist Raoul Franz states that the whole vegetal world lives responsive to the movement of the Earth and its satellite, the Moon, and to the movement of the other planets of our solar system. He states further that the stars and other cosmic bodies in the universe will also be proved to affect the vegetable kingdom. All life is connected by subtle threads of affinity, and therefore any movement at one end of the spectrum affects the other end. I think this theme has been explored by many scientists of the modern times, and it comes to mind that Rupert Sheldrake spoke about the morphic fields, and in this echoes the ancient theme of the interconnectedness, suggesting that archetypal experiences are carried in the unconscious of all humanity. Understanding this principle is to act with responsibility. If we appreciate that there is this interconnectedness and that any movement of whatever dimension takes place, it is going to affect the entire universe, then one has to act with a sense of responsibility in one's thoughts and in one's actions. This interconnectedness and interdependence that exists between all species of life, everywhere in the process of evolution. For example, the acacia tree enlists the protective services of certain ants that it rewards with nectar in return for the ants' protection against other insects and herbivorous animals. In this relationship between the acacia tree and ants, both are supportive of each other and maintain the harmony of nature. Nature has so much to teach us in the sense of the interconnectedness and interdependence of the various species of life. And we see examples of this if we have keen eyes to observe whatever is going on in nature. Plants, according to Raoul France, are capable of intent. They can stretch forward or seek out what they want in mysterious ways. It is possible to see this movement in the woods where plants wind their way up through the thick growth in order to get sunlight. To get adequate support, vines wrap themselves around trees and they grow together. So you can see these examples of the interconnectedness of life and an example of how human beings should live in this world, depending on each other, not taking advantage, and supporting each other. The many species of life evolving on this earth act in accordance with the limitations of their forms and their instinctive natures. Referring to the great intelligence that guides this evolution, the Light of Asia has some very beautiful words. It states, and I quote, "A power which builds, unbuilds, and builds again, ruling all things according to the rule of virtue, which is beauty, truth, and use, so that all things do well which serve the power, and ill which hinder." The key words are, and I repeat, all things do well which serve the power, and ill which hinder. And then it explains further the working of life in the animal kingdom. Nay, the worm does well, obedient to its kind. The hawk does well, which carries the bleeding quarries to its young. Each species behaves instinctively according to its needs. When a lion kills its prey, it does so for food and not out of any malice. And once its belly is full, it has no reason to kill until its next meal. There are, however, exceptional cases in the animal kingdom of animals behaving contrary to their instinctive nature. In Kenya's game parks was a lioness, which I'm sure many of you may have heard about. This story became quite a excitement for people at that time. This lioness behaved very differently from its normal nature, and it was given the name Kamuniak by the Maasai people. And this word meant the Blessed One. Why was she called the Blessed One? For she repeatedly adopted young Thompson's gazelles, young deer, that had been left motherless. and gave them protection. And the game wardens who observed them saw the lioness moving with the young deer for days on end. The lioness did not hurt them, and they moved around freely with her without displaying any fear. It was only after some days that the game wardens had to wean the young gazelles from the lioness, for she did not know how to feed them. This was an example of animal consciousness having progressed far ahead of its species and displaying great love and compassion. There exists this natural harmony between many species, and therefore they support each other. For instance, some varieties of birds remain stationed on large animals like rhinos and provide a service by eating the ticks off their bodies. In his book, Kinship with Whole Life, the author J. Allen Boone writes about human experiences with animals and states that it is possible to set up the right relationship with them. In one very amazing experience, an experiment that he conducted, the author records the extraordinary experience that he had with a domestic fly, with which he was able to establish communication. And in his book, he goes into details of how he was able to communicate with the consciousness of the fly to make him come and land on his hand, or to go away when he wanted it to go away. And when it was in another room, and friends who were amazed by what he mentioned to them asked him to demonstrate that experience again, in consciousness, he asked the fly to come back to that room, and it did. This was really an extraordinary experiment that he created. And he states, if you would learn the secret of right relations, look only for the good, that is the divine, in people and things, and leave all the rest to God. I'll repeat this again. If you would learn the secret of right relations, look only for the good, that is the divine, in people and things, and leave all the rest to God. Herein is a message for rightful living for the human race. Professor J.C. Bose, the great scientist of the 19th century, quoting the ancient sages of India, said in this connection, "They who see but one in all the changing manifoldness of this universe, unto them belongs eternal truth. Unto none else, unto none else." So repetition of that eternal truth, seeing the one in the changing manifoldness of this universe. As the ancient sages of the Upanishad age said in their writings, nature whispers to us in many ways and through many mediums. And we have seen some examples of this in this presentation. The cultivation of the sensitivity for experiencing the vibrancy and harmony of life is the road to awareness. Human consciousness has lost much of this sensitivity under the influence of materialism. There is an interesting account of the reply given by the Indian chief Seattle to the government of the United States of America when it made an offer for the purchase of the land of the tribe. And he said in reply, "We are part of this earth and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The deer, the horse, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The rocky crests, the juices in the meadows, the body heat of the pony, and men all belong to the same family. The rivers are our brothers, they quench our thirst. The rivers carry our canoes and feed our children. If we sell you our land, you must remember and teach your children that the rivers are our brothers and yours. And you must henceforth give the rivers the kindness you would give any brother." So here we see a dimension of universal brotherhood taking into account the entire existence. The principle of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which was referred to by Professor Krishna in his presentation, is reflected here, but to include also the totality of all life. The brotherhood is of all life. In whatever form it manifests itself. In this message of the great chief is suggested a way of life in which there is harmony with all existence and awareness of the beauty of nature. There is no differentiation between the various species of life or nature itself. A reflection on our current values indicates that we are far removed from the harmony of nature, and consequently, there is much suffering in the world. The current excessive use of the resources of nature has reached such dangerous levels that its fragile balance is threatened. The perversion begins with the human race, which through greed and self-centeredness is responsible for the state of the earth and its vegetation and the various other species of life supported by it. The principle of universal brotherhood without distinction, not merely as an ideal to be aspired for, but as has been pointed out in the previous presentation, is a reality in nature. And it is only when human beings understand this reality and act in consonance with it that the principle of brotherhood can become a reality of our existence. The statement that the plucking of a flower affects a distant star places into focus the responsibility that we bear for all our actions. In her presentation, Dr. Dara Thatre gave the example of the throwing of a stone in a pond that disturbs the atoms of the water. Using this as a simile for the universe, we need to understand our responsibility for our actions. Are our actions conducive to the creation of harmony or disharmony in the world? Are our actions conducive to the creation of harmony in the world or disharmony? A state of awareness brings to the fore the subtle motivations of the mind which acts in separativeness. The human mind divides and differentiates between what it identifies as a self on the one hand and others on the other hand. It accentuates and perpetuates differences rather than seeing the inherent oneness of existence. Awareness enables one to observe its workings as an uninvolved observer. The mind's preconditioning makes the thinking process function along established grooves. It categorizes and differentiates in many ways. In dealings with other people, it brings in separation on the basis of caste, creed, and so on and so forth. And Professor Krishna has dwelt on this at considerable length. It also functions with self-importance and deprecating others as not so important. The movement of the mind is so subtle that unless one brings in alertness and awareness, these movements are not always noticed. Even when one feels that one has got rid of these divisive tendencies, they still do exist in subtle forms. It has the cleverness to convince that it is free from any of the distinctions, like race, religion, sex, etc. But keen observation brings in to the fore the motivations behind its actions. The self manifests in many ways in its dealings with the world around it. With awareness comes acceptance that distinctions do exist in the mind and have to be faced. I think during the Congress, this is the theme that we spoke about, and I think there was this understanding that distinctions are there and the mind divides. But we have to face this reality and come to understanding of the principle of universal brotherhood. Krishnamurti states that we are responsible for the state of the world because we think in terms of race, religion, caste, etc. The individual therefore bears responsibility for the problems facing the world. By our actions, we send ripples through the universe and disturb the harmony when they are not helpful actions. It is therefore a truism that the plucking of a flower or the generation of a thought affects the distant star. When we look at the many issues facing mankind generally, the question should arise in our minds as to our responsibility in contributing to these problems. Krishnaji was once asked a question in India about the real cause of Mahatma Gandhi's untimely death. His answer was very revealing. He said, "World events are not unrelated incidents. They are related. World events are not unrelated incidents. They are related. The real cause of Gandhiji's death lies in you. The real cause is you because you are communalistic. You encourage the spirit of division through caste, through ideology, through having different religions, sects, leaders, etc. When we come to reflect on our own actions and how we react to situations, we can see the truth of Krishnaji's statements. We can see the kind of emotions that came into being during the recent World Cup of how people behaved en masse. The sense of patriotism which people claim they have sometimes produce negative emotions and negative results in terms of feelings for others. So questions of this sort have to be faced by people as to their role in contributing to the unrest in the world. Herein are summarized some of the problems that stand against the spirit of universal brotherhood. Deep reflection will certainly bring to our attention many of these conditions from which we all suffer. The road to awareness is to recognize these tendencies within us and to negate them by disassociation from them. This is a continuous battle. If we can be in a state of awareness, and if we can remind ourselves of the universality of life, then it certainly helps in negating some of the problems that we create in our mind. The society's objects clearly guide us in this respect if we were to live by them. This may sound utopian because many speakers said during the Congress that to realize universal brotherhood is an extremely difficult task. But certainly constant awareness helps in negating some of the influences which bring in this division within us. The major issue humanity is faced with is its total alienation from nature, this being the other issue that we have. Clearly, the brotherhood that we refer to is not restricted to human beings alone, that this brotherhood should encompass all life around us. If the animals and the trees and other forms of life are not considered compassionately, then true brotherhood does not exist. Mother Nature has not received due consideration from the human race. The cutting down of large forest areas, excessive mining, pollution of rivers and seas has resulted in the extinction of many forms of life. Human self-centeredness, human greed are responsible for this state of affairs. The harmony of nature is disturbed with the resultant consequences of climate change, tsunamis, and earthquakes. So the question that we need to ask of ourselves, are our values based purely on material progress our right values? Is humanity going in the right direction? Humans have been conditioned into believing that more and more of the material goods are desirable and that this will bring them happiness. This, however, is not so, as many people have discovered after much suffering. The excessive competitiveness that influences many people and makes them aspire for more and more wealth does not bring with it happiness or contentment. There is therefore a need to reassess the values of our present age and to revert to a more natural mode of living that would enable men to reconnect with nature. And the Indian chief Seattle had a very good message for us, and he expressed the reality of modern urban living when he said that there was no place in the cities to hear the sound of the unfurling of leaves or the sound of the rustling of an insect's wings. The noise and clatter of modern living alienates men from nature. This is reflected in the clutter in our minds and our inability to be in a state of silence both within and without. The appreciation of the innate beauty of the flower, the river, the mountain, etc., re-establishes links with nature and a sense of kinship with it. Manjuji gave this beautiful story of the village sculptor. It is amazing that this very story was going to be a part of my presentation as well. And it appears that our thought waves crossed. But it's a beautiful story. And what I want to add to that is the message that we can derive from it. The artist in the story talks about having seen this beautiful form. He said, I saw it was there. You can call it a goddess, you can call it the inner consciousness, the cosmic energy, whatever way you want to put it, that he was able to see that, to the surprise of the villagers. And the message for us here is, are we able to see that divine consciousness in everything that is around us? Because imagine a world which was totally uniform. It did not have any variety. It did not have the various races, the various shades of people, various natures of people, and all the wide variety of life that we have around us. To see in these different manifestations, not of human beings alone, but in the various other forms of life, in the different colors and different shades of opinion of people, if we can see the one vibrant consciousness, if we can see the one vibrant consciousness manifesting itself in different ways, then this is the road to wisdom. Thank you.